Rain falls gently as 65-year-old Mama Grace sits silently in the back seat of her daughter's sleek black SUV. She clutches a tattered Bible, its leather cover worn from years of use, and stares out the window, where water streaks like tears down the glass. Her hands tremble slightly, but she says nothing. The air is thick with tension, heavy like the clouds above. The car slows and turns into a quiet, well-maintained compound. A clean cream-coloured building comes into view, trimmed hedges lining the driveway. A sign reads clearly, Golden Age Care Home. Mama Grace blinks, confused. She turns slowly to look at her daughter in the front seat. Chi, where are we? Chidinma, 32, elegant in a sharp blazer and bold red lipstick, is too busy responding to a message on her phone. Her nails click against the screen, and her expression is one of impatience. Mama, you'll be better off here, she says without looking up. There are nurses, good food, even a chapel. It's peaceful. You'll be fine. Mama Grace's lips part slightly, her voice soft and wounded. But this is not my home. Chidinma finally meets her mother's eyes through the rearview mirror. I can't keep doing this. I have meetings, a business to run. I'm trying to build something for my future. You'll be well taken care of here. Mama Grace's voice trembles. I gave up my own future for you, Chidinma. I worked these hands to the bone so you could sit where you are now. How did I become something you're ashamed of? Chidinma opens her door without replying. A nurse, plump and polite, approaches them with an umbrella and a rehearsed smile. Good afternoon. You must be Madam Grace. We've prepared your room. Please come with me. Mama Grace hesitates. She steps out of the car slowly, her Bible still clutched to her chest like a shield. Her eyes roam the grounds. The iron gate, the unfamiliar faces behind windows, the rows of elderly men and women seated quietly inside. This isn't right. I'm not ready for this, she whispers, almost to herself. Chidinma stands beside her, arms crossed, clearly uncomfortable. It's not about what you're ready for, Mama. It's about what I need to survive. I can't breathe anymore. And you think I could breathe when I skipped meals so you could eat, Mama Grace says, eyes shining. When I sold my wedding ring to pay your school fees, did I once call you a burden? Chidinma flinches, but doesn't respond. Her phone rings again. She turns away and answers it. The nurse gently guides Mama Grace toward the entrance. Her footsteps are slow, reluctant. The door opens, and with each step inside, she feels the cold grip of abandonment tightening around her chest. Just before the door closes behind her, she turns around. Chidinma is already back in the car. She doesn't look back. A tear slips down Mama Grace's cheek, and the door shuts. Young Grace is shown as a vibrant woman in her early 30s, standing behind a rickety wooden table at the local market. Her hands are rough from years of labor, her wrapper always damp with sweat, but her eyes burn with determination. She calls out to passers-by with a wide smile, selling tomatoes, pepper, onions, anything to earn a living. On her back is a toddler, little Chidinma, sleeping soundly despite the noise. Her husband had died suddenly. Malaria, the neighbors whispered. And since then, the weight of the world had settled on Grace's slim shoulders. At night, by the dim glow of a kerosene lamp, she stitched torn clothes for neighbors, whispered prayers, and counted the few naira she had managed to make that day. When Chidinma fell ill once, burning with fever, Grace had run barefoot to 3 different clinics before one agreed to treat her. After she handed over her wedding ring as payment, cut to the present, Chidinma stands in a glass office on the top floor of a skyscraper. She's dressed in designer clothes, her hair laid perfectly, phone glued to her ear as she paces the room barking orders. The contrast is stark. Her apartment is a modern marvel, cold, sleek, and lifeless. Family photos are nowhere to be seen. When a junior staff member mentions Mother's Day, Chidinma shrugs. I don't have time for those sentimental things. Meanwhile, inside the nursing home, Mama Grace sits quietly by a window. She wears the same brown wrapper she had worn the day she arrived. Her Bible sits in her lap, untouched. Around her, other elderly residents are greeted by family members, children laughing, grandchildren bringing flowers, hugs exchanged. Grace watches them with a hollow gaze. No one comes for her. A pair of nurses stand nearby, whispering in low voices. They say her daughter brought her here and just left. No visits, no calls, one says. I heard she said the old woman meddled too much, the other adds. She's probably one of those overbearing mothers. The rich ones always have stories, the first nurse concludes with a shrug. Grace hears every word but says nothing. She simply rises slowly, back slightly hunched, and walks toward the hallway with the slow dignity of someone who has carried a nation in her chest. It is during one of these slow walks that she meets Nkechi, a young nurse in her 20s. Nkechi has kind eyes and a motherly warmth despite her age. She notices the way Mama Grace's hands tremble as she holds her Bible. "Would you like me to read to you, Mama?" she asks softly one day. Mama Grace lifts her eyes. "You know Isaiah." Nkechi smiles. "Chapter 43 is my favorite." From that day, a subtle bond formed. Nkechi starts visiting Mama Grace during breaks, helping her oil her feet, massaging her swollen knees, and sitting with her during the quiet. She listens without rushing, never interrupting Mama Grace's long stories about raising a daughter alone. Grace talks often about little Chidinma, the child who used to call her my sunshine, how she danced around the house when she passed her common entrance, how she hugged her mother tight when she got her university admission letter. "She used to love me," Grace says one night. "I don't know when I became invisible." Meanwhile, on the outside, Chidinma continues curating the image of a perfect life. She posts selfies from a yacht in Zanzibar, brunches in Lekki, parties in Johannesburg. Her captions are filled with hashtags: #, soft life, #, no wahala, #, boss lady. Mama Grace calls once, twice, no answer. On the third attempt, Chidinma picks up, but her tone is impatient. "Mama, please, I'm in a meeting. I just wanted to hear your voice. I'll call you later." She never does. Later that evening, Grace sits in her room staring at her phone. Her hands are weak, her eyes watery. Nkechi enters to find her trying to hide her tears. "I used to think if I gave her everything, she'd never forget me." "She hasn't forgotten you," Nkechi says gently. "Sometimes people run from love when it reminds them of their own shame." Mama Grace doesn't respond. She only turns to the window where the sun is setting, the light catching the tears rolling slowly down her cheeks. In that golden silence, we feel the weight of a mother's love, unshaken, unreturned. And somewhere, far away in a penthouse suite, Chidinma raises a glass of wine to a toast, smiling for a camera, unaware that the woman who once carried her through fire now sits alone, waiting for a knock that may never come. One night, Mama Grace suffers a mild stroke and is rushed to the hospital. She had just finished praying, whispering softly into the quiet of her room, when the right side of her body suddenly went numb. Her Bible slipped from her lap and hit the tiled floor with a dull thud. She tried to call for help, but her words came out jumbled, slurred. By the time the night nurse and Nkechi found her, Mama Grace was on the floor, half conscious, her eyes wide with fear, one hand reaching toward the door as though trying to pull herself out. "Call the ambulance!" Nkechi shouted to another nurse, kneeling beside her. "Mama Grace, can you hear me? I'm here. Just stay with me." At the hospital, doctors worked quickly to stabilize her. It was a mild stroke, but her right side was weakened, and her speech was affected. By morning, she could open her eyes and speak slowly, but the exhaustion was clear in her body. The doctor pulled Nkechi aside. "She'll survive, but barely. Emotionally, she's deteriorating. She's not just sick, she's lonely, forgotten. Her spirit is breaking." Nkechi immediately tried to reach Chidinma. She called, texted, and even left a voice note. No response. Eventually, one of Chidinma's assistants called back. "Madam is currently in Dubai on a corporate retreat. She'll check her messages when she can." 3 days passed. Mama Grace lay in the hospital bed staring blankly at the ceiling. Nkechi stayed as much as she could, reading her Bible aloud or combing her grey hair gently, but the sadness in Mama Grace's eyes never left. On the 4th day, Chidinma finally appeared. She walked into the hospital room wearing sunglasses, a silk scarf around her neck, and the air of someone deeply inconvenienced. Her phone buzzed in her hand as she barely glanced at her mother. "I had to cut my trip short," she said to no one in particular. "Somebody should have told me earlier. She almost died," Nkechi said, voice tight. Chidinma shrugged. "But she didn't." Mama Grace stirred, her voice hoarse. You came." Chidinma looked at her briefly, then picked up a clipboard and began signing the consent forms for extended care. "I'm authorizing long-term support. You'll get a private nurse here," she said flatly. "No more back and forth." Mama Grace turned her face slowly, tears welling. "You didn't even ask if I'm okay." Chidinma sighed, still not looking at her. "Mama, I don't have the strength for this emotional blackmail." Mama Grace's voice cracked as she spoke. "Why are you so angry at me, Chidinma? What did I ever do to deserve this kind of treatment?" Silence filled the room. Then Chidinma exploded. "You want to know? You really want to know? You smothered me, Mama. You raised me to feel like I owed you my life. Every success, every step. I carried this burden like a curse. You made me feel guilty for dreaming bigger than the life you gave me. I'm tired." Mama Grace blinked, stunned. "I never asked for repayment," she whispered. "Only love." Chidinma clenched her jaw. "Well, maybe that's the one thing I no longer have to give." The room fell silent, and Kichi looked away, trying to hold back tears. The pain in Mama Grace's eyes was deep, but it wasn't just from the stroke. It was from something older, something broken between mother and child that words alone could no longer fix. In that moment, the weight of generational misunderstanding and emotional debt hung heavy in the air, neither one of them knowing how to heal what had been festering for years. Nkechi sits by Mama Grace's hospital bedside, gently wiping her forehead with a warm towel. The older woman looks tired, her spirit dulled by more than just illness. There's a heaviness in her silence, the kind that says she's slowly giving up. Nkechi takes her hand and leans close. "Mama, you've carried so much inside you. Maybe it's time you let it out. Not for her sake, for yours. Write it down. Everything. Your pain, your hopes, what you wanted for Chidinma. Let the paper carry what your heart can't anymore." Mama Grace doesn't respond immediately, but the next day she asks for a pen and a hardback notebook. With trembling hands and halting words, she begins to write. She writes about the day her husband died, and how she stood in the rain with a 1-year-old Chidinma strapped to her back, unsure how they'd survive. She writes about pounding yam until her knuckles bled, selling tomatoes under the blazing sun, skipping meals so her daughter could eat. She confesses the nights she cried herself to sleep, feeling alone but holding on only for the child who called her my everything. She writes about how she denied herself suitors, men who wanted to marry her, because she didn't want her daughter to grow up in a home where she felt like an outsider. She writes about how proud she was when Chidinma got her first job, and how she waited for her to come home that night, holding a bottle of malt and biscuits to celebrate. Chidinma never showed up. The words flow slowly, but with each page, a part of Mama Grace begins to breathe again. Meanwhile, far from the quiet hospital room, Chidinma's world begins to unravel. She returns from Dubai to find that her business partner, whom she trusted blindly, has embezzled millions from their joint account. The office is buzzing with tension, and investors begin pulling out. Her assistant informs her that 2 key clients have backed out due to concerns about leadership transparency. Days later, her boyfriend of 2 years, Nonso, sits her down in the middle of a fancy restaurant and tells her it's over. "You don't know how to love, Chi," he says, shaking his head. "You shut everyone out. You walk around like emotions are a weakness. I tried, but I always felt like I was with a machine, not a woman." Chidinma stares at him, speechless. She returns home that night to find a brown parcel at her door. There's no name, no return address, just her own written on the front. Inside is a notebook, old and slightly bent at the corners. It begins simply, "For my Chidinma, in case I don't get to say these things aloud." Curious, she flips the page. By the 3rd line, her hands begin to shake. "I remember the day you cried because the other children mocked you for not having lunch. I had no money left. I borrowed 10 naira from Mama Oge and ran to your school with puff puff and juice. Your smile that day, I'll never forget it." Tears fill Chidinma's eyes. She reads about the first time she had malaria and how Mama Grace sat awake all night with a rag soaked in warm water, singing softly as she placed it on her forehead. She reads about how her mother would stay up late learning to sew clothes because Chidinma once said she wished she had a Christmas dress like the other girls. The words are raw, real, and full of a kind of quiet suffering Chidinma never imagined. Each page is a revelation, and with every sentence, the stone around her heart begins to crack. She remembers being 9 years old, sitting alone on the school bench, hungry and embarrassed, until her mother appeared, out of breath, holding Puff Puff and a box of 5 Alive. She remembers pretending not to know her, ashamed that her mother sold pepper at the market in worn slippers. She remembers the joy in Mama Grace's eyes the day she graduated, and how she never turned to wave as she left the convocation ground. She closes the journal and places it against her chest. For the first time in years, Chidinma weeps. The next day, dressed modestly in jeans and a simple blouse, she goes to the nursing home, but the receptionist looks at her, surprised. "I'm sorry. Mama Grace said she doesn't want visitors today, especially her daughter." Chidinma is stunned. Did she say why? She just said, "Tell her I've given her everything I have left. She can read the rest in the journal." Chidinma walks slowly to her car and sits behind the wheel. She looks into the rearview mirror. What she sees isn't the successful CEO the world praises. She sees a little girl, lost and angry. She sees a woman who traded connection for comfort, success for solitude. She sees someone who abandoned the one person who loved her the most, just to avoid feeling small. And then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she asks her reflection, "Who have I become?" Chidinma breaks down on the drive home. She grips the steering wheel as hot tears stream down her face, the weight of years crashing into her chest. Regret, shame, longing. She turns the car around, not caring about the speed limit or the rain beginning to fall again. She races back to the nursing home, her heart pounding. She storms through the entrance, breathless. "Please, please, let me see her. I don't care what she said before. I need to see my mother." The receptionist hesitates, eyeing her desperation. "Let me check with the nurse on duty." Minutes feel like hours, until Nkechi walks out from the hallway, her face unreadable. "She's awake," Nkechi says softly. "She said you can come in, but don't expect things to go back to how they were." Chidinma nods quickly, wiping her tears as she's led to Mama Grace's room. Inside, the room is dim. Mama Grace sits by the window, wrapped in a thick shawl, her Bible resting in her lap like always. She doesn't turn when the door opens. Chidinma enters slowly, her steps shaky. She kneels gently by her mother's side. "Mama," her voice breaks. "Please, look at me." Mama Grace turns, her eyes tired but calm. She says nothing. Chidinma lets out a trembling breath. "I didn't know how to carry everything. I was tired, confused, angry. I thought if I stayed away I could forget the guilt, the pressure. But it never left me." She chokes on her words, tears falling freely. "I never stopped needing you, Mama. I just didn't know how to show it. I was wrong. About everything." Mama Grace looks at her for a long time. Her voice, when she speaks, is low but steady. "I wasn't perfect either, Chi. I held on too tight. Maybe I wanted you to fill the silence your father left behind. Maybe I gave you love in a way that felt like pressure." She places her hand gently on Chidinma's head. "But I loved you with every fibre of my soul." Chidinma lets out a broken sob and buries her head in her mother's lap. For the first time in years, there is silence between them that is not cold, but healing. Then, there's a soft knock. Dr. Yusuf, the lead physician, steps in holding a file. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he says gently, "but we got Mama Grace's test results back." He hesitates, then continues. "She has late-stage pancreatic cancer. It's aggressive. There's not much time left. A few months at most." The air in the room goes still. Chidinma lifts her head slowly, her eyes wide in disbelief. No, that's not possible. She's recovering. She just had a stroke." Dr. Yusuf shakes his head softly. The cancer was already spreading. The stroke was just the first sign of how weak her system has become. Chidinma turns to Mama Grace, her heart dropping into her stomach. "Mama." But Mama Grace, calm as ever, nods slowly. "I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in my bones." Tears fill Chidinma's eyes again. No, please. We just started fixing things. We just started talking again." Mama Grace smiles faintly, brushing her daughter's cheek. "Maybe God waited for your heart to soften before he called me home." Chidinma clutches her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. I'm not ready to lose you." Mama Grace leans forward with the strength she has left and kisses her daughter's forehead. "My child, you already lost me once. Don't lose me again in regret. Let's make the time we have count." The clock ticks quietly in the background, but now every second feels sacred. Time has shifted, and for the first time in years, so has love. Chidinma handed in her resignation letter the very next morning. The sleek office, endless meetings, and high-stakes deadlines that once defined her world suddenly felt hollow, meaningless. She realized that no amount of success could fill the space her mother's absence had carved in her heart. She rented a modest apartment near the nursing home and moved Mama Grace in with her. The first few days were awkward. Mama Grace, once so independent, now fragile and quiet, and Chidinma, still learning how to care for someone she had neglected for so long. But slowly, the walls between them began to crumble. Chidinma spent her mornings preparing Mama Grace's favorite dishes, amala with uwadu soup, peppered fish, and freshly brewed zobo. She watched carefully as her mother's eyes lit up at the familiar tastes, a smile breaking through the frailty. In the evenings, they sat together reading the Bible, just as Mama Grace used to do when Chidinma was a child. The rhythm of scripture, prayers, and gentle conversation wrapped around them like a healing balm. Chidinma took over little rituals her mother had done for her, massaging Mama Grace's feet after long days, tucking her in with a soft blanket, and humming lullabies her mother once sang. With each act of care, Mama Grace grew stronger, not just physically, but emotionally. The deep sadness that had weighed her down began to lift, replaced by moments of laughter and stories from her youth, shared freely now. And Keiichi, who had been a constant support, started visiting regularly. No longer just a nurse, she became like family, bringing warmth and companionship into their home. The three of them often sat together in the living room, sharing meals, exchanging stories, and finding joy in simple moments. Chidinma's guilt didn't vanish overnight, but the heavy burden it carried softened. She began to understand that healing was a process, both for her mother and herself. Moved by her own journey, Chidinma founded Grace Home, a non-profit dedicated to supporting abandoned and neglected elders in Nigeria. The organization offered shelter, medical care, and emotional support to those who, like her mother once did, felt forgotten. At the inaugural event, Chidinma spoke with quiet conviction. "My mother gave everything she had to raise me. Now, I want to give back, not just to her, but to every elder who deserves dignity and love." Mama Grace sat beside her, her frail hand clasped in Chidinma's. Their eyes met, and in that moment, years of pain, regret, and misunderstanding melted away. They had found something rare: forgiveness, redemption, and the strength to build a new chapter together. And as Mama Grace smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude and peace, Chidinma knew that this was only the beginning of healing, for both of them, and for many others who would find hope through Grace Home. One quiet afternoon, as the soft afternoon light filtered through the curtains, Mama Grace slipped peacefully into sleep, her hand resting gently in Chidinma's. Around them, gentle gospel music played, filling the room with warmth and calm. Chidinma sat by her mother's side, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks, feeling the bittersweet weight of goodbye. In that moment, years of pain and regret seemed to dissolve into a profound stillness. Mama Grace's journey had ended, but the love they rebuilt lived on, stronger and clearer than ever before. Weeks later, under a bright morning sky, Chidinma stood before a crowd gathered at the opening of the very first Grace Home Center. She held her mother's worn journal in her hands, the pages filled with stories of sacrifice, hope, and unspoken love. Her voice was steady, but filled with deep emotion as she spoke. "I once thought my mother was a burden. I was blinded by frustration, by anger, and by my own pain. But through her journal, through her story, I saw the love she poured into me, the sacrifices she made quietly, without complaint." She paused, glancing up at the faces before her, elders, volunteers, families, all touched by the promise of this place. "This home is more than a shelter. It is my way of saying sorry to Mama Grace. It is my way of saying thank you. To every elder who feels forgotten, you are seen, you are loved, you are not a burden." Chidinma closed the journal gently, a tear escaping down her cheek. The crowd erupted in applause, but in her heart, she knew this was just the beginning, a new legacy born from love, forgiveness, and hope. Sometimes those we think are burdens carry the heaviest love and sacrifice. Never take family for granted. Cherish, forgive, and heal while you still can.